business continuity planning, and disaster recovery planning. Huge topics, hugely important. Any organization will, if given enough time, encounter a disaster. Our job is to minimize the impact of it, make sure that many of them never happen, and to find ways where we can recover as fast as possible. If we do not do our due diligence, the organization or the company we work for may be severely impacted or may have to close. There's a reasonably large study done that of the companies that had major data loss, 43% never reopened, and 29% of the remaining closed within 2 years. That's more than 7 out of 10 that never recovered. And even with this knowledge, many businesses choose not to focus on disaster recovery or business continuity because it's too expensive. And if you are the person in an organization like that, it really is your job to keep pushing and push with something that senior management can understand: numbers. The business continuity plan is the big overarching plan where a lot of the smaller plans that we're going to look at feeds into the business continuity plan. And it is focused on the entire organization, not just IT. And in the BCP, we create those long-term strategic business plans. We create our policies, we create our procedures, all the things that we need to do and not do in the event of a disaster. This is also where you are that 3-year-old kid. What if, what if, what if? What do we do if flooding is normal here? How do we deal with that? What do we do with earthquakes? What do we do if a truck drives through the wall of our data center? Can we do anything to completely avoid the disaster? If it happens, can we make it less impactful? And how can we recover as fast as possible while still not spending millions on millions of dollars unless it makes sense in our business? Exactly enough security, not too much, not too little. It is very common for the BCP to have a bunch of the subplans I talked about. COOP, continuity of operations. How do we continue our operational day-to-day things? Crisis communication plan. We have very specific people that are allowed to communicate both internally and externally. Critical infrastructure protection plan. Our infrastructure is not created equal. Some things are much more important than others. What can we do to protect those? Cyber incident response plan. Again, cyber, it kind of makes sense. It's the online stuff. What do we do when this happens? DRP, our disaster recovery plan. We will cover this one much more in detail, but what do we do? How do we get back from a disaster? And we may also have an ISCP and an occupant emergency plan. Since the system is so broad, you need to know everything, but you do not need to know anything in very great detail. We will cover most of these, but again, just like anything here, it is just gonna be on the surface. And since you are that 3-year-old that asks all the questions, we also have the answers. What do we do if this critical supplier closed? Is there any way we can get supplier redundancy? Is there someone else we can buy the same things from at maybe slightly a higher cost? Is now the time to get a good relationship with them? Maybe we can choose just to buy 5% of our stuff from them, but in the case of an emergency, we have the pre-established relationship. We can switch suppliers at a drop of a hat. What if we get hit by an earthquake? We've talked about this one before. Can we move the critical data center somewhere else? Where do staff is snowed in? Can they work from home? And so on. We go through all those scenarios and we build the plan for each of them. And we will, just like with our risk analysis, look at how bad is this if it happens and how likely is it to happen. If it's bad and it's even a slight chance of it, we might want to look at what it is going to cost to put effective countermeasures in place. And many of the countermeasures we could look at would cover many scenarios. We might choose to build that redundant data center that has active servers that used both for redundancy and load balancing between the two data centers, and we might choose to let employees work from home. Then if an actual earthquake happens, snowstorm, flooding, whatever, we have that redundancy. A lot of the countermeasures we put in place can be used to minimize or mitigate many of the risks. And as with most things in IT security, it's an iterative process. We are never done. We need to keep tweaking it. We need to keep making it better. And because things always change both in our environment and in IT in general, we just need to keep updating it. And in most places I've worked, the BCP is kind of a collaboration between our internal key staff and external consultants. They have the experience on what should be in the plan and how to mitigate many of the things, and our staff has all the information that's specific to our environment. Our DR plan, or disaster recovery plan, is us creating the short-term plans, policies, and procedures and getting the tools we need that enables us to recover or continue the operations of our vital IT systems in a disaster. Here we focus on how we get the important IT systems up to support the critical business functions. And as mentioned multiple times, the DRP is a subset of our business continuity plan. It is also very common to have the cyber incident response plan be a part of our DRP, but it does not always have to be. Since pretty much any device we have that is IT today is connected to the internet, it does make some sense to have them together. But this also ties back to the difference between IT security and cybersecurity. Cyber is anything online. IT security is everything. All our systems does not necessarily have to be connected to the internet. So while those two terms are used interchangeably today, you need to understand the difference. Part of the DR plan could just be, what do we do in a power outage? Technically has nothing to do with the internet, but it is an outage we need to do something about. How do we provide that system redundancy where we can deal with that? This could be a geographically distant site with a server pair at the primary and secondary site. It could just be having generators, have UPSs, have whatever we need to ensure that power. And just like the policies and procedures are different, while the policies are the high-level non-specific, the procedures are the low-level and specific ones, DR and BCP is the same. The BCP is more the high-level, non-specific, overarching plan, where the DRP is the system-specific, what do we do and how do we do it. See the common trends here? We talked about the different categories of disasters before: natural, human, and environmental. All of them make sense, you just maybe have to logic your way through that environmental are things in our environment and not nature. But they are an integral part of our DR planning. And some of them, like I mentioned with fire, can be all three, but how we protect against it will be very different if it's a natural, a human, or an environmental cause. Natural might be forest fires. We would have some warning and we would be able to put in some countermeasures, whereas human might be someone lighting our building on fire. How do we protect against that? And then environmental. When the server catches on fire, it's probably in our data center already. What do we do to put that out? Since we already covered all this, I'm just going to skip over this slide real quick, but understand how the three differ. Let's look at a couple of the most common types of disasters and what causes them and what we can do to fix it. Errors and omissions is by far the most common type of a disruptive event. And since it is errors and omissions, these are internal employees. An error is a mistake, an omission is not doing something. These are unintentional, in most cases at least, but they can have a huge impact on our organization and definitely our security. This could just be someone mistyping in the numbers. It could be someone leaving a door open while they go outside to smoke, because it's much easier than using the main entrance. Or it could be someone storing our backup tapes in a closet where 50 other employees have access. And as mentioned, most of them are not malicious. It's just easier. It probably won't matter. What could possibly happen? And the answer to that is bad things. And luckily most of these are minor issues, but we need to keep an eye on them. Is leaving the door unlocked a problem? If it is, maybe we need to put a siren in place that sounds every time the door has been opened for more than 10 seconds. Can we do some sort of integrity check when critical stuff is typed in? And can we find somewhere else that's more secure for our tapes? Most of these have simple solutions, but the ones that can have that adverse effect on our environment needs to be controlled and mitigated if possible. And here are some of the ones we need to take into consideration for environmental disasters. Is it common to have power outages in our area? Do we have enough battery and generator backups to sustain our data center and our organization for an extended period of time? Technically, as long as we have redundant UPSs and redundant generators, If they have enough fuel, they can continue operating as long as we need them. In most cases, we would have the redundant UPSs and generators for our data center, but do we have other buildings that are also considered mission critical? If we do, we probably need to put something in place there as well. When I was the IT manager of that bank, one of our branches had the redundant UPSs in the data center part of the bank, but the DMARC where the internet connection from the ISP was handed over did not have it. So when a power outage happened, technically the entire data center was up, but it was not communicating with anything because the internet connection was down. And the solution was pretty simple. We just put in a 4U battery bank into the rack where the internet connection was terminated, which would give our equipment about 45 minutes of uptime even when the power was out. In this example, heat is environmental. We keep a lot of data centers way too cold. Not only does it cost a ton of money to keep the temperature that low, but it also raises the humidity, meaning we need to pull more of the moisture out of the air, which again costs more money. Many data centers keep it around 60 or 65 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 to 7 degrees centigrade. That is, in my estimation, and most people agree on this today, way too low. A common range to keep it in, and this is also where most of the equipment manufacturers suggest you keep it, is between 68 and 77 Fahrenheit or 20 and 25 Celsius. Heat can also be from nature. If it's extremely warm where you have your data center, then you would have the appropriate countermeasures. Make sure you have enough HVAC to keep the data center cold. We've talked about both the pressure, how we want to keep positive pressure inside the data center. Whenever anyone opens the door, the air pushes slightly outwards. We keep the contaminants out. We make sure that the particle density in the data center doesn't rise and inadvertently set off the fire suppression. And then we keep the relative humidity between 40 and 60%. If it's too low, we will get static electricity. If it's too high, metals will corrode. Since a big part of our server is metal, that's a horrible idea. When we moved to Hawaii in 2016, one of the things I brought was my computer tower. At that point, I'd had it for about 4 years. We live in Fresno in California. It's really warm and it's really dry. The case when we moved here after 4 years looks pretty much new. Within 2 months of living in Hawaii, the screws on the back of the case were completely brown because they rusted, because the relative humidity in Hawaii is really high. I also jokingly say that there is no such thing as stainless steel in Hawaii. It's stained steel because everything will rust. So for the data center in Fresno, we barely spent any money keeping the humidity down. We actually had to add humidity to the air, whereas the data center in Hawaii, we spent a ton of money keeping the humidity down.